It's time for Fresh Outlook, everyone. I'm Mia Toschi. To all of our viewers from around the world, we welcome you to the show. It's a big holiday weekend. Many people around the world are celebrating Easter or Passover. And here in the United States, many people are also celebrating Boston Strong. The 2014 Boston Marathon is set for this Monday. It was 1 year ago this week when the bombings took place. But listen to this. The 118th Boston Marathon is expected to bring in an estimated 36,000 runners, which is 9,000 more than last year. 1 million spectators are also expected to show up for the event, twice the usual crowd. Now, how's that for Boston Strong?
This is the chaos, panic, and bloodshed of the 2013 Boston Marathon. This video was shot right in front of marathon sports. A year later, daily life is back to normal here.
The scene outside was the most gruesome thing I've ever seen, otherwise than just watching an actual war-style movie. That's what you saw, but this was totally real life.
For many of those caught up in the blast, the physical effects have scarred them for life, quite literally. Heather Abbott was at the site of the second explosion, and her left leg has been amputated below the knee. On the anniversary itself, Heather's attending memorial events.
I'll be watching Erin Chatham, who's the woman who initially found me on the ground, cross the finish line. She's running the marathon for the first time.
As Boston prepares for this year's marathon, many hope the experience will help heal painful memories of 2013.
And to talk more about this year of triumph over tragedy, we are joined by former White House aide Dee Dee Benkie. We are also joined by John Wareham, writer of best-selling book Sonnets for Sinners. We also have via Skype, we have Dr. Bart Rossi, and we also have Yohuru Williams, Dr. Williams we should say, from Fairfield University. We welcome you all and thank you so much for being here. And you're a first-time guest here, so you're in the hot seat.
I am in the hot seat.
So let's talk about this year. It was really something to watch and just marvel at the strength of many of the people in Boston. Let's just get some first thoughts, initial thoughts from Dee Dee.
Well, just so proud of the Bostonians and also New Yorkers, since we're here in the New York area. If you remember, the New York teams were saying, putting up, good luck Boston, and we're with you, and, and there are big rivalries. And I think that in this area, people, whenever you are struck with a tragedy like that, you really do buck up or not. And in the Midwest, people, just because I am a Midwestern, they're a little softer. But I got to tell you, the New Yorkers and the Bostonians, they're a tough crew. They really are. Good for them.
Absolutely. Dr. Williams, of course, you're in Fairfield University, pretty close to Boston. Just your initial thoughts.
I flew back from Boston yesterday. Actually, I was there for a conference. And the resiliency of the city, I think Dee Dee hit it right in the head. It's amazing. You see this in Americans, particularly in moments of tragedy, our ability to come back and to bounce back. And I think Boston Strong really symbolizes the strength and character of the American people in the same way that we saw post-Katrina, post-9/11, and now we have the situation in Boston. The way that they're responding, the way they're preparing for the marathon this Monday, fantastic.
Isn't it amazing, though, to see 36,000 people that are going to be running this year?
Yes, well, I think a thing like this brings its publicity. It can bring something good as well out of a tragedy. It's what you get from a tragedy that makes the difference. And I think the city has come to appreciate that, and that's why, of course, everyone around the world is here now.
Now, John, I want to talk about some of your work. You actually work inside prisons and actually talk to people about overcoming tragedy through hope.
I do. So when I heard about this particular tragedy, well, of course I saw it, but as did everybody, I thought of a young man in my class when I thought of those men, and he wrote a poem in this book that I have out, and he's got 15 years left on a sentence for
I believe
murder.
You said murders.
And he's now 25, but he said, "Who am I? What have I done? I can't believe I did that. What have I become? Why are those guys oozing red? That one looks just like he's dead. They're staring at me, every one. Wherever did I get this gun?" And I just thought those two young men that did this, that they didn't understand what they were doing. They were out of their minds, literally out of their minds.
Dee Dee, take
I'm
that one.
sorry, but to give them a pass to what they did to these people in Boston, I think that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I mean, I'm glad that you're that compassionate, but I don't understand that.
I don't think I
way
gave
of
them a
thinking at all.
pass. I didn't give them a pass.
But they didn't know what they were doing. I think they knew exactly what they were doing.
Well,
And-
this
but-
was a well-plotted out.
Absolutely, it was well plotted. But I have to say, the people of Boston, they're so positive about it. It's really amazing. But to give these people a pass or say they didn't know what they were doing, I think is wrong.
pass. I said, at that age, a young man with tremendous amount of testosterone, who's imbued with his
Okay, we're blaming this on testosterone
religion.
now?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure what your experience has been with people who actually commit crime, but my thing that I have learned is that they don't really know what they're doing. They think they think that they're making a choice.
Well, let's check
their
in
brain
right
is
now
not in play.
with Dr.
Good timing.
Rossi. Let's check in with Dr. Bart. Dr. Bart, I know that you're listening to all this. We're talking about, obviously, the two men who committed this horrific act. Did they know what they were doing?
I think they're both seriously flawed individuals, obviously, very pronounced personality problems that were long-standing. I think if you look at both of them in their history, it was developing over time. I think they developed a lot of hatred, a lot of resentment for our way of life. And I really have a quite negative, really kind of harsh view of them. And I've been in, by the way, in every state prison in New Jersey, seeing prisoners for years. We did all of the parole board evaluations for the state of New Jersey for many years. So I have a pretty harsh view of these individuals. I think that they really wanted to deliver chaos, and of course they did. And I agree with Biden. I thought he had the best line of all when he said that we own the finish line. And he's right. And the only way to really deal with really wicked, terrible people like this, in my view, is to thrive. And I agree with what Dee Dee said before about the way Bostonians and the way New Yorkers rose to the occasion. I think that's what we're doing. We're thriving. And that really pushes back.
I want to share a little bit of a story. I actually did work with the family of Richard Martin. He was the 8-year-old boy who was killed. His sister lost a leg, and his mother, who was a librarian in the school, was blinded in one eye. And the family has given their forgiveness, which I'm not so sure I could
wouldn't.
do.
I don't forgive those people. And I wasn't even with those.
But
it's just terrible what they did.
I believe I'm absolutely amazed. They're all going to be turning out at the finish line. A lot of the folks are also going to be running this race, which is also unbelievable. And I think that's Dr. Williams. Let's have you weigh in on that. Is inspirational? I mean, how much more inspirational can it be?
I think it's great in that sense. And to kind of enter this debate a little bit, because I do agree with Bart and Dee Dee, but I also agree that there's something that we can learn from the Tsarnaev brothers.
Absolutely.
You know, part of the conversation this week has been about what have we learned in terms of the country, in terms of our intelligence response. And we're talking immediate aftermath of the bombing, of this being a failure of the intelligence community. What we found is that, no, we actually knew quite a bit. These men were apprehended within 3 days. Minimal amount of casualties. I think one casualty is one casualty too many, but this wasn't New York. It wasn't 3,000 dead. So in a lot of ways, we have much that we can look at and take away from this. But I think there's still something to learn from the individuals themselves. What drives people to these types of politics? Right. Not saying, of course, disagreeing with Bart and Dee Dee here, that this is a horrific act and these men need to be held accountable, but there is something that we can learn from them.
And what is it that we can learn from them? Let's push that forward. What can we learn from them?
What is driving people to pursue these kind of radical avenues for dissent? And we can talk about the hatred of America, and we can talk about radical politics, we can talk about religious influence, but this is lone wolf terrorism. So this isn't state-sponsored terrorism.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot, you know, in studying them.
There are evil people in this world. They were evil. They killed a little boy. I mean, there are people that are maimed for life, and they knew exactly what they were doing. They plotted it out. It was wrong, and there's nothing more to say than evil.
Just because they plotted it out doesn't mean...
You said they didn't know what they were doing.
Just because they plotted it out does not mean that they understood what they were doing.
I don't understand what you're saying.
They could be thinking that they're watching a movie. Listen, it was an awful thing they did, and I do not forgive them for it. I despise them for it. But I say we should try to understand why young men see this as the only option. No.
And
I say they were
90%
out of their minds, but I didn't forgive them. I said, let's try to understand what's going on in their head.
It was premeditated. I don't see how you can say they didn't know what they were doing. Premeditated is worse than snapping. Snapping's bad enough. And even if they didn't know what they were doing, they're still bad people. It doesn't matter. It still happened.
But the FBI does this now in terms of profiling. There's something that we can learn by looking at the aggregate body of individuals who engage in these types of activities, and maybe that'll illuminate some light on how we can, be proactive in the way that we address this type of lone wolf terrorism.
Absolutely, and later in the show we are going to be discussing, actually I was doing quite a bit of research this week, but it may shock you to know that white supremacists, there's more people joining up than ever before, which frightens me, but we will talk about that later.
It's bad because it can evolve into what these people did, which was wrong.
But let's talk about hope and recovery before we end this part of the segment. We saw there was a couple that got married at the Boston Red Sox game. I thought that was absolutely phenomenal. We also saw quite a few people who are going to be crossing the finish line with their new prosthetic legs, which is unbelievable in the past year. Just any final thoughts on just the hope and recovery for this Monday?
Well, it's such a change. Remember the individual that was in the wheelchair and both his legs were blown off. It was a very graphic picture. And now look, I mean, he's already up and about, and he's,
he's
living
written
life.
a book, and he actually wanted to come on the show, and he couldn't this week. We're going to try and get him next week.
All right. Well,
So-
Mia, you've got all the hookups, so I'm sure that we'll get him.
But I think it's just amazing, and the same thing. I work with a group also. We've talked about it before, but the 9/12 generation of thinking about how a tragedy like this and focus on the positives, learn from the negatives. I think that's probably the best summation. So, any final thoughts, Dr. Williams?
Just that I think recovery is born of hope. And so in a lot of ways, the more hopeful and optimistic people are in the wake of a tragedy, the more you recover, the quicker you recover, and the better prepared you are for the next tragedy.
And there will be another tragedy.
Absolutely.
And the question is, what will we extract from this so that it wouldn't happen again? What happened inside the hearts and the minds of those individuals? And if we don't make the effort to understand them, we won't learn anything.
Let's get final thoughts from Dr. Rossi. And Dr. Rossi, I'm sure you heard me say before, but 36,000 runners this year, that's pretty good.
It's pretty good, but to your point before, I really feel that some folks are very good at changing their expectation levels, as psychologists say, and they're also very good at setting goals, whether they have one leg or no legs. They're really good at projecting out into the future, and it's quite inspirational.
All right, well, we'll leave on that inspirational note and keep it right here to Fresh Outlook. We'll be right back with our Whirl Around the World, a look at the top topics making international headlines this week.